Thanks. Welcome to the Environment and Transport Overview Scrutiny Committee. There's my name. I would like to remind everybody present that this meeting will be broadcast live via the County Council's website and will also be available for viewing after the meeting. Can everyone please switch off the microphone when you're speaking and turn it off when they finish speaking? I have received apologies from Mr. Bill CC, and I think we've got a substitute. Mr. Jeffrey, how are you today? It's always good to see you. Thank you. And so we go straight onto the agenda number one. I propose it's the minutes of the meeting held on the 31st, 2018, and they're the pages 5 and 10. I propose that these minutes of the meeting held on the 31st of May are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Can I have a seconder for that proposal, and all in favour? Yeah, thank you very much. So yes, they're approved.
Can I offer my apologies at the
By all means, I know there's been a bit of a conflict there, but I'm sure the hour you spend here would be well used. Thank you. 2, question time. I have received no questions. 3, questions asked by members under the Standing Order 73. You're quite all right with the response, and we had... Okay. Can I just say, did we had some very good response there from, as all members got them now? Yes, they have. You've all got them. Thank you very much. Just making sure. So we move on now to number 4 on the agenda. To advise of any other items which the chairman has decided to have taken urgent elsewhere. There's no urgent items, I don't think, so we move on. Declarations of interest in respect to the items on the agenda. Any declarations of interest? I don't think so. So that means we move on to item 6, declarations of the party whip in accordance with the overview and scrutiny procedure, Rule 16. No, we move on. Presentations under petitions of Order 36. No. And then we move on to item 8, response to petition requests to improve road safety at Moira School. Mr. Sheenan's asked to have a quick word. Welcome. Looking very summery there.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not my loudest shirt, but it's an indication of...
Yes, I will do. Let Ian introduce the report first. Ian, would you like to do the report first?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you will recall, at the last meeting, we were presented with a petition from a member of the school, Moira School, regarding concerns about road safety, signed by over 500 people. We have been able to undertake all of the investigations within the last month to bring a report back to you here today, and this is for members for consideration. Whilst the petition specifically indicated Blackfordby Lane as their area of concern, as there is another entrance to the school and other roads affected, we did widen the scope of what we were investigating just to make sure we did the whole school and its entrance and its travel areas around. As you can see from the plan in figure 1, where the school is located, where we undertook the various data collections, quickly just to advise members, we already have in place a number of measures around the school, advisory yellow school clear markings. The main entrance is 40 metres from the vehicle entrance, and the speed limit, which was one of the concerns I know the teacher raised, which is 100 metres north of that entrance, just there on the plan. There is an advisory school 20 mile an hour zone around the area with the normal flashing signs, and the whole of Blackfordby Lane is street lit. We then undertook the investigation, as we always do in every response to every request we get, be it a petition or an individual, looking at the accidents, the speeds, and applying that to the criteria we use for allocating our funding for dealing with safety measures first. Quickly going through, speeds on the approaches to the school. We undertook quite an extensive speed surveys, which basically led to the 85th percentile, and the average speeds are indicated there. Whilst they are above the 30 mile an hour zone, especially travelling in from outside, as you'd expect from the national speed limit, they are within keeping on what you'd normally expect in that area. Traffic volumes were also indicated, but as you can see, the traffic volumes are quite low and the road has more than enough capacity for dealing with those. We then undertook rather extensive parking surveys, as that was one of the causes of complaints. And if you look on page 14, the figure 2 shows the areas at which we had cameras. And the reason why we use cameras is it can show those ones which are dropping off and picking up near school times, as well as the indigenous almost parking from the residents. That showed us that essentially on Blackford Lane itself, where the petition was regarding, there were 5 vehicles associated with parking, some of which were residents. But the other roads we also pulled in as well, which is the main entrance being used, Woodlands Way and Hazel Grove and Ashfield Drive. There were 8 in the morning peak and 10 in the afternoon. My experience of dealing with schools, that's actually quite a nice level of parking outside of school, and one of which I think most would aspire to. So parking-wise, there wasn't seen to be a large problem there, although there was some considerate half-on, half-off pavement parking going on. Essentially, pleasing to hear, in general at schools in Leicestershire, there is not a injury accident reported problem outside schools themselves. We have a very good record after many years of investment, and I'm pleased to say that's the same outside the school here. There have been some accidents associated with the site in the last 3 years, but none of those were in the school times and none of them were associated with pedestrians. So that's the normal sort of levels you'd expect for that level, unfortunately. Other feedback, we also spoke to Arriva, who run a bus route there, and they often will tell us if there are problems with getting their vehicles through, and they said they also experienced no problems, as did the police when we spoke to themselves. We have contacted in the past the school offering advice and support, not only recently about changing the advisory school zigzags to enforceable school zigzags, but also travel plan advice, so they continue that very good work we heard about when she came to tell us about before. And that offer is still there, although we've had no response back, and we would love to hear back from the school, so we will contact them again.
So they haven't got a travel plan, that's what you're saying, or have they got one?
No, they don't have a travel plan at the moment. Not the one that's active, I believe. Okay. Well, all of our responses to the school for their travel plan and offering advice have fallen on deaf ears. So if they have got one, that's really nice to know. If they want any more advice with it, they can let us know. Okay. So leading to the conclusions, essentially, on page 20, whilst there isn't a speeding issue that we would address or an accident issue under our current criteria for putting resources in, we do feel that the gateway as you come in from the national speed limit into the 30, like many other places around Leicestershire, would benefit from having that highlighted. So we will put down the normal zigzag markings and increase the conspicuity of the signs. And once again, it's nice to see they have a travel plan. It'd be nice if they want to, they could talk to us more about it. And also, if Mr. Sheehan, if you could ask them if they want to put the advisory zigzag markings to be mandatory, so we could include them in the programme we're currently putting together. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Ian. Let's have I think, Councillor Sheehan, you'd like a bit of a presentation there. When was the travel plan completed? Is it just off the hot off the press, or have they had it a while?
Shall I work that into my response, Chairman?
Of course.
There we go. Shall I kick off? Thank you. Can I just thank the officers for a very thorough investigation and report? Nice piece of work. I accept the conclusions, although I think you could do a little more with the speed of traffic as it approaches the village. I think that could be taken down to 50 zone. You've done similar things in Measham, either end of Measham. I know there may be reasons why you haven't put it forward this time, but I would suggest that you keep that under review and consider it in the future if needs be. But I would like some explanation, nevertheless, as to why it's not been considered. Well, it may have been considered but not been implemented this time. As regards the travel plan, I have just printed this off from the head teacher saying, I've sent you this, because I said, where's your travel plan? Because I'm sure they had one. So they sent me this, which is a school travel plan review. Now, I can only assume they've had a travel plan for some time, and this is the latest review of it. So you can have that. They've also sent me minutes of their traffic meetings, which they've had, looks like every few months there. So it shows that they're actively working with the issues and trying to solve the problems. It's helpful to hear that the police are willing to build any enforcement requirements into their patrol plan. I'll ask the school to contact the police to make sure that that does actually happen. I'll also ask the school to, or prompt them to, consider taking part in the trial about the zigzag enforcement scheme, which seems like a good idea. Why not? But apart from that, I know it's hard to get any money spent on these things these days, so I'm being realistic, but thanks for what you have done. Keep it under review, and of course if further problems occur, then I will be in touch. I'm sure the school will as well.
Thank you very much, and hand those over. That'd be fantastic, so we can at least be proactive. Ian, over to you again.
Yes, very quickly, thank you for that. And if you could send it electronically to me as well as paper copy, I can forward that to the team. The response on the zigzags would be appreciated really quickly, because we're just putting the programme together now, and we're just putting together the orders and the consultations for converting them. And I think this is one of the ones we can do quite quickly, so that would be really good. The only other offer I would give is, as we said in the report, if any other funding was to come forward from outside, we're not opposed to speed reducing measures on the roads outside there. Unfortunately, it just doesn't meet our criteria. So if any other funding you're aware of comes forward from the parish or any other source, more than happy to continue to discuss. And as always, we constantly monitoring through our accident databases and our reports that we do what's happening outside areas, but I'm sure you'll ring us quicker if you hear of something happening. Thank you very much.
Okay, over to Blake.
Just very quickly, yes, I'd like to thank the officers for the work they've done here, and it just goes to show that when a petition is submitted or a request is made to look at a particular problem, particularly in relation to schools, the department do go the extra mile to do a thorough piece of work as possible. Just on a point I want to make about the School Zigzag, the mandatory programme that we've already spoken about and scrutinised. We've undertaken a survey against 400 plus schools. We've had, in my opinion, a very, very low response rate from the schools. We've had, I think, fewer than 60 responses to that survey. The programme is dependent on the willingness of schools to engage in that programme. So if members are aware of schools in their patches that might benefit from being included in our mandatory zigzag programme that we've already discussed, can you encourage those head teachers and the management of those schools to engage with the county council so that we can help them do something about the issues that they're concerned about?
But we all know, unfortunately, schools are, you just have to work. If you're a governor or work in a school, they get millions of things thrown at them, and I know they have different priorities, but I do understand what you're saying. It is important, but unfortunately, schools are under the cosh a fair bit. The other issue is all members in the briefing from all parties were, I think, confident that the feedback we had, that it's not just a petition, it's one request will be followed through. They take it very seriously, and that does give me confidence that we get on top of things as quick as possible, not necessarily resolve them as quick as people would like because of expectations, but I know everything's taken serious. So I felt very confident in the briefing and quite happy with that. Any other questions or... Right, thank you very much. Over to you. Yes.
I'm not sure Mr. Veers answered the question about why the reduction in the speed limit was not brought forward this time. Could you just perhaps give
Would you just answer that, Ian, I think?
Yes, as always, when we look at reductions in speed limits, it will be looked at on what the speeds are, what data we've got, and what's the nature of the road coming in. When I was discussing this with the team manager who compiled the report, we did discuss any further measures we might want to do, such as the countdown speed limit, and it was felt not to be appropriate because drivers' behaviour is very much about the environment they're in, and it was felt a 50 wouldn't be advisable. So.
Are you okay with that answer at the moment?
Yeah, as I said, I'm okay with it anyway, but I think it's something to keep in mind for the future if we have any problems.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate you presenting today, and thank you for bringing the information.
Yep.
That's been really helpful. Thank you very much.
Okay.
On to item 9, which is the additional highways maintenance funding, and this is, I think, Anne. Is it Anne now you're going to present? Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out what the additional funding that was approved by Cabinet in May this year of 5 million towards highway maintenance will be spent on. I thought it'd be useful first to set out for you, however, our performance in highways maintenance as a context there. So firstly, the table on page 21 shows the satisfaction with road conditions in Leicestershire. This is a national survey, NHT, and it shows how we are doing against other county councils. You'll see we're ranked first against 31 county councils for our satisfaction with road condition, and we're ranked 11th across a whole 112 other local authorities in terms of that satisfaction with road condition. If you move on to the table on page 23, this is the DFT's benchmarking that we put data into, and a vast number of authorities across the country also put data into. And it shows that actually across all three categories of road, which are principal, that's primarily your A-class roads, your non-principal, which are your B and Cs, and then your unclassified, that we do better than all other county councils across all three categories. And actually, in terms of all other authorities, there's only one there, which is Cornwall, who have a better classification for us in unclassified, who have got a larger network than we have. Everyone else, if you look on that table, has much smaller networks than we have. The figures at the top of the table headers show you what the Leicestershire figures are for each of those categories there. So ultimately, we're performing quite well in terms of our highway maintenance. However, if I take you back to the graph at the top of page 22, while on that one, it shows the percentage of network of each of those categories requiring some kind of highway maintenance to that, and you'll see that for principal and non-principal, we've kept those figures really low. Low percentages is obviously good, less that needs maintenance. What you're beginning to see for unclassified roads, which is the biggest percentage of our network, over 2,500 kilometres, actually we're requiring more of our percentage requires highway maintenance. A greater percentage requires that highway maintenance. So what we conclude for that is we're in a very challenging situation. So this additional money for highway maintenance is more than welcome. Paragraph 8 shows that not only have we been fortunate enough to be allocated 5 million from the 17-18 underspend, but also 3.3 million one-off from 16-17 corporate underspend, and an additional 0.6 of a million a year as well. What we will be spending that on is a mixture of both preventative, because under the government's new code of practice and moving to a risk-based approach with highway maintenance, it's more about the preventative, i.e. maximising your lifespan of your highway asset, and less of the reactive, which tends to be the less effective and less efficient means of dealing with your highway maintenance. However, we will have a mix. We'll be moving to preventative, and there's still some reactive in there. And as you'll see in those 3 bullet points, the types of things that we will be spending that on, everything from surface dressing, pre-patching for surface dressing, street lighting columns, crash barriers, gullies drainage, signing and lining, the things that, I'm sure a lot of members will see in their post boxes. So that money is really welcome. The final point I would make is I'll take you to the graph under paragraph 9 on page 24. This shows that our funding over time for highway maintenance. And those green lines on the last 3 columns from 18-19 financial year onwards, the green line shows where we would have been without this additional funding. So in effect, the net difference that funding is making in each of those financial years. So while this year it makes a substantial difference, as you'll see, when you look on to 1920 and 2021, even with that additional funding, we've in effect got less funding for highway maintenance than we have had available over the last decade and more. So while this is very welcome, what I would want to stress is I don't think for a minute we're going to see vast improvements in our performance in the network. If anything, what we'll do is we'll slow down, any rate of deterioration and begin to manage that. The other point, my final point I'll leave you with, Chair, if that's all right, is If we had maintained the level of funding for highway maintenance they had in 2009-10, with inflation added to that, in 2020-21 financial year, we would have had 40 million available for highway maintenance. As you'll see from that, we're just over 20 million. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Max. I've got you there. Just to say that thanks for the transparency and honesty, because this is what we're facing. Just from an experience, I do a lot of mileage with the business, and I know other people do here, but just going over the border to Staffordshire, to Nottingham, sometimes there's a massive difference of the quality of road. So I feel that we're doing very well in difficult circumstances. We're a lot better off than a lot of the counties around the country. So I'd like to say thank you for that, because you know, I've got good tyres on the car. I don't want to damage them. So Max, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I thought the histogram on page 24 was exceptionally illuminating, and I'm not quite sure. It doesn't probably include the effect of inflation either on these figures.
Max, could you put the microphone down a bit? Yeah.
Sorry. If the figures included inflation, I think they'd look even more concerning. What does concern me are the effect, really, of putting in a one-off £5 million from the capital asset fund. That's not going to be consistently available, and my concern is that the figures will become even more difficult when that £5 million runs out, in effect. And I wonder whether there are any contingency arrangements to cover that, or whether this is just a short-term, although substantial, injection of cash that will demand attention in the future.
That's a fair question, Max. I mean, in reality, what we've presented with, as the directors just said, that if we'd have carried on the level from 2009-10, we'd be spending 40 million. So I think, obviously, you've put contingencies in, obviously working better, you've got different plans. So obviously the question is the 5 million.
A very good point, yes. And there is something about not looking a gift horse in the mouth. However, what I would say, what the 5 million plus, well, it's actually more than 5 million, it's 9 million, as you see from that paragraph 8 there. What that's giving us is the breathing space to allow us to tackle some of the things we need to tackle out there in the network, while we're moving to this new approach that the government's instigating, that we should be moving to, the more preventative, risk-based approach. That in itself is about really squeezing the efficiency out your money in what you get back for that investment on your network. So the way I look at this is it gives us that breathing space to get to the point where we are more efficient in delivering and continuing to maintain our highway network, in effect with less money, because that's the challenge governments are giving us. But, well, it's a challenge we're all in as highway authorities. I think the other thing to bear in mind is we are helping ourselves by a whole host of other initiatives that we're doing for, a variety of reasons. Obviously, money is always in there. And I'll give you an example of LEDs and street lighting. The LED, and don't quote me exactly on the figures, but the LED street lighting, but the fact that we have replaced the 68,000 street lights out there with LED has taken our street lighting energy bill, which is a significant chunk of these figures, 3.3 million it used to be, down to 1-point-something million. We've in effect just about halved our street lighting energy costs. So by doing things like that, we are helping ourselves, because we've got, it's taking a less of a chunk of basically a smaller budget. So we are doing a whole host of initiatives like that help us on the road to, in effect, maintaining that network out there, that asset in there, with fundamentally less money than we've historically had.
Janet.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to express my thanks to the customer service department and the highways, because I had to repair team, because I had to, of course, to get in touch with them when a hole appeared in the road about the side of a T-plate, and the lamp was hit and was moved. So they were out within that day or the next day to finally finish them off. So my thanks for the speed that Highways repair team came out and the way customer services handled it. So I'd like that minute in, please, that I express my thanks to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the table on page 21, and if any other organisation was in the first place, in whatever form of measurement you were going to use, you'd be using that in marketing and blazing it all over your website. Of course, if you do that, and you're at number one, there's only one way you can go. But I still think, having said that, you should be very proud of a performance like that and satisfaction rating. Thank you.
That's a fair point. Blake.
If I may respond to that positive comment that Paul Brenner's just made, you're absolutely right, and be assured I have used this at every opportunity when communicating on the radio and in the paper, because I think we should be, like you've quite rightly said, very proud of this achievement. It's not the first year, this is a second year, so it's showing a degree of consistency. The caveat to that, of course, is what you've just said. There's only one way to go when you're at the top, and I think we're being completely transparent and honest by saying right now that this is about managing the resources we've got and trying to limit the deterioration of our road network. The only other thing I'd say, and it goes back to the funding, it would help exceedingly if the government were to offer us, or the Department for Transport or the Treasury, some kind of longer term funding solution for our local roads. What the £8 million that is identified in this report, the £5 million that's come from the Cabinet decision recently, but the £3 million, which is made up of the pothole fund, which the government offered to us after this very extreme winter. If they were to give us some medium-term funding allocation that we can use to plan our finances, not only would those graphs be marginally better than what they are, but to help the department to really use that money more efficiently. They can do it with the NHS, seemingly. They can do it in other areas of public services. And I really do think that local authority highways deserve the same treatment. It would help us, it'd help the government, and it'd help, more importantly, the people we serve.
Quite interesting, because I know it was brought up in briefing, even the environment strategy, that there's certain things we can plan, but certain things we wait. It's in the wind. It's in the what is the central government going to do? It's difficult to plan. So I do agree with that. I just put on a personal basis. I think more interesting is the rank versus participant authorities. At one stage we were 21. We're back up to 11 again. So that means we're not taking our eye off the ball. So I think that's very positive in a way, that we see these figures. Obviously, there's some work gone into there to get us back up. That's what I like, those sort of things. So it's not always being first, it's keeping an eye on it and making sure that we improve our figures continually. Any more questions? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is Melton Mowbray. It's the wonderful news that we've got regarding the distribution road. I think a lot of people call it a bypass, or I think it's a distribution road. I think that's the right term, isn't it, Blake? I think we need to make sure all the messages we get, because we have different terms, ring roads and relief roads, and from a person who lives in Melton and those who drive through it, you realise this is an amazing opportunity for us. It's very exciting. Literally, I've been sitting there sometimes for 15 minutes to go a mile. I can't believe it. It's just like being in London. But this is not just Melton. I think this brings an opportunity for economic growth in the area, and outside of Melton, it's going to free things up, and I think help Leicestershire lots of ways. But it's a massive project, and there's going to be a lot of pressure put onto the department, but I know they'll be really excited and do a great job. So the report's there. I'll go over to Ian to... We don't want to do it to death because it's been here that many times, I think. I think we're just a quick brief and then we can move on, but it's fantastic times.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we relish the opportunities of delivering such big things so quickly. And obviously bringing so many reports in such a short time back. So I will gloss over rather quickly. The report is very extensive, and essentially what we're reporting back to Cabinet now, because thanks to one of our glorious Members, we have been given an opening date for the Melton Mowbray Distributor Road, even though everyone calls it a bypass, of the 23rd of May, which we're now working to 2022. We have an awful lot of work to get done over the next couple of years in order to start in 2020, including the possibility of bidding for other fundings for the southern section of the road as well. But what we have here is the next stage is on after the announcements for the funding. We have confirmed the preferred route, which made some alterations following the consultations we've done. And those are shown essentially on page 35 in the plan, and the main changes there are in the northern section where it's turned from green to the top section where it's black. We've moved the road further out north. That was mainly in consultation with Friends of the Country Park and also the landowners in that area, the developers, which actually helps them as well, but it also helps us with the building of it. And the main sections which are hard to see are then in the extent in figure 3 is around where the River Eye is being diverted. There are subtle changes in the lines there, but as we go over a river and duck under power lines, the subtle changes in the river realignment have mean we've moved around the road slightly, but it makes quite huge changes and saves us quite a lot of money. So that's the changes in the preferred route. We are now going to Cabinet for the process as it rolls on for submission of planning permission at the end of August, beginning of September, which will start then also the discussions in earnest about purchasing of land. We've already been having those informally, but now we move to more formal. And all the other raft, as you can see in the reports, of environmental impact assessments, building through the design, going into then the confirmed business case, and then the formal design ready for letting contracts as well. So a lot of work to be done over the next couple of years. This is one of many large projects we're delivering, and I think goes on to the success of how well we're doing in having a good case for bid for evidence, and now our task is to deliver it. Thank you.
Fantastic. It's what just to add to this, that we've got those who don't know the Friends of Country Park, they're very active group in Melton. We've got a lovely country park. If you've not visited, it's a wonderful place. They like to look after it. They're very impressed with the consultation, very impressed. Action's been taken place, and that really goes well with the residents and the community of Melton, that they've been listened to. They feel they've contributed, and I think that's important in any consultation. And we've got a lot of happy people there in Melton, but there's still an odd few that aren't sure. So that's the life we live. Any other questions? Bill.
Thanks, Sharon. Just a couple of questions. First of all, are we sure we've chosen the right route? What about the people who are going to be upset about the route that has not been chosen? To go to public inquiry, are we happy we can withstand the resistance from that group? And the second one is, I know removing the river, rivers don't like to be moved. And in times of flood, they tend to revert back to their original course. Man has great difficulty persuading nature to change its mind, and I just hope that engineering works are sufficient to make sure the river doesn't revert to its natural route.
I could, sorry, your microphone.
And the other question further on is on page 74. I appreciate all the things down there, but I can't understand why we've got Himalayan balsam down there as something that needs to be preserved, because normally we're taking that out as fast as we can. So I'm a bit concerned about that staying there. So, you know, invertebrates, fish, great crested newts, grass snakes, wintering birds, yeah, all those things, but Himalayan balsam doesn't fit that list.
Thank you, Bill. I'll get Ian to answer that in a second, but to your second question, I've always wanted to say this, damn. Sorry about that. Over to you, Ian.
Okay. The processes we've gone through so far, not only about the very big, looking at do you go east, do you go west, what's the line of the route, have all been a very iterative process with a lot of evidence to back up every decision at each point. Lots of consultation has gone ahead, and as you've heard, However, if you do have to require land in order to build these things, there are some people who are not going to be happy, hence why we started talking some time ago. We are very confident, as was the Department for Transport, in the work we've done, and surety of delivery was one of the key criteria for us receiving the money. They scrutinised that on their visits to us as well, and we have a very, very firm evidence base, so we're confident of the process. Notwithstanding, we will be consulting again through the planning process, and any new comments that come out will be considered properly. On the question of the River Eye, I'm actually pleased to say we're actually putting the River Eye almost back onto its old line, not the one it's now on. It was some time ago when other things were done, it was forced off its line. And now we're actually, and the Environment Agency are very, very happy now with the work we're doing, because we will actually improve the river habitat that's there as well. As you can imagine, they wouldn't have let us just do this if we weren't, one, making it better, and two, it was the right thing to do. So they're now working with us very, very collaborative on that. We have, if when you see the plans come out in the planning permission, taken quite, well, put a very large red line around the area for the planning permission, because we will be looking at flood mitigation across that whole area, and if we have to do other work. So very good point, and I'm glad we've picked it up very well. On the final point, yes, we will be following the biodiversity implementation protocols, and anything that shouldn't be there won't be there, and anything that should go back will go back, as it says. There is a little of a problem with the formatting of the report, unfortunately, which we'll make sure is sorted out. But I think when we went through in briefing, the large extent of all of the environmental issues we're now considering going into the design, from badgers to Himalayan balsam and various other things, is getting an extensive amount of work, and unfortunately or fortunately, that's what you have to spend a lot of money on. And it was good that we were able to do this in advance of the government's funding coming forward, where the council said they will commit the funding for us to do this. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to do this so extensively without having the money. So it's very good news.
Just to add to this, I mean, and to clarify, I think it would have been 8-10 years ago, there was a survey. I think Leeds, was it Leeds University or one of the professors, when we started talking about the bypass, it was then. And the favourable was more the west. But in those years, things have changed. So when we did the survey of the increase in traffic, A1, the A46, economically, this side of that we're doing economically and commercially, that makes sense first, Bill. And because I asked that question, why aren't we going the other way? And of course, there's a lot more floodplains the other way, and land's a bit more expensive. So there is reason. Where a number of years ago, it may have been economically sound. It's not now. This is the best way. I think that's fair enough. Okay. Max, yeah, far away.
It's a question about the southern section in particular, with regard to cycle safety and so on. The detailed design for the southern section, particularly as it abuts the A607, is yet to come forward. Well, I don't know if that come forward to us or whether it'll just be dealt with by the experts. But that would concern me particularly. I think we did discuss cycling at the last time this came up, and I was given assurance that the main part of the inverse C distributor road would include all the usual cycle considerations. I just wondered how that would apply to the junction with the A607, which is particularly hazardous, I would say.
Thank you, Max, and thank you for getting the distribution road right. Thank you. I saw your thought, and then yeah, okay, melted language. Thank you, Ian.
Yeah, I mean, the designs so far now are all progressing up, and that will be part of the consultation we do as part of the planning permissions as well. Please take my assurance as a promoter of walking, cycling, and all other non-motorised users. If it's required in here, and I think it will be, because it will be a big benefit, such as around when we did the last Old Shilton Relief Road and so forth, it will be included. We have fully costed that it will be there, and that's been in the design plans so far. But as you see plans forward, I'm sure we'll be here with another report very quickly on another stage. But if any member wanted to come and see the plans as we've got them, more than happy to show them to them as they're being developed.
And we'd like to invite them all to Melton. We'll give you a few free pork pies, guys, and a bit of Stilton cheese, and we'll look after you. Hey? Food festival, yeah. Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. We now move on to item 11, Ash Dieback Action Plan. I think all of us here would be concerned about these foreign diseases that have been brought into the country in regard to our natural habitat. But this is a difficult one, so I'm over to Joe. Over to you, Joe. Just a matter of interest that you're very flowery today. I hope you don't get any fungus on that. You know.
I wanted to fit the part. Thank you, Chair. If I may, I'd just like to introduce Vicky Cormie, who is one of my heads of service, who has worked extensively in the background behind the scenes, sort of liaising with the Tree Council, who are advising DEFRA on this. So I profess that if you've got any incredibly technical questions, I'm going to look at Vicky, and then if it's about trees, we may both look somewhere else, because our tree colleagues from Countryside Services aren't here, but we'll do our best. So, if I may, through you, Chair, I'd like to just outline for the committee and seek views on the proposed approach to managing ash dieback, which, as you mentioned earlier, is one of these situations that is beyond our control, so we're having to react to it. There is a supporting action plan, again, which we'd appreciate thoughts on before it's presented to Cabinet next week. In the background to the report, we set out what ash dieback is, and my simplistic summary being that it is a fungal infection, it's airborne, so it's arrived, ultimately its origins are in Asia, and it was first officially recorded in Britain in 2012. Incidentally, the first evidence was in Leicestershire at Birstall Park and Ride, where we recorded it in Leicestershire in the same year. And the fungus ultimately causes a range of symptoms on the ash tree, from leaf and branch dieback, so withering back of its limbs, ultimately right through to the full death of the tree. In that background, aside from outlining the disease, we talk about when it first was recorded. We outline the findings of some survey work that we carried out last year, which does it outlines and it confirms that we do have the presence of dieback across the county. We are seeing it in some of the younger plantations. We're not seeing very much evidence of it in the mature trees, but obviously we're in the early stages, we think, though again that's very difficult for us to fully articulate just because of the way the disease matures. Point 9 of the report sets out the scale and the number of ash trees in the county. So whilst they're not exact numbers, they do give you some sort of scale of this 500,000 ash. It's a native species. It's going to have a substantial impact. And we articulate where they're either generally prevalent or on land controlled by the county council or within the risk of impacting the highway, where we have duties associated with that and powers. We also acknowledge that we've taken expert national advice, and they've suggested that we plan for the loss of between 75% and 90% of ash in Leicestershire. In terms of the plan itself, we've proposed a live document which would enable us to react over time and evolve. There is already a board that I chair that has cross-departmental representation on it, so highways, colleagues, countryside, insurance, communications, because it will be diverse in how we manage it. We've applied best practice approach advocated by DEFRA and the Tree Council, and it aligns to the Council's tree management strategy, which in essence is the means by which we manage all tree-related diseases or impacts, and it is fit for purpose. We've reassessed that, and it would be fit for the job of managing ash dieback. We are proposing a risk-based approach, which means that we'll try and maintain the highest levels of health and safety for the public while minimising the impact on the landscape and ecology of Leicestershire, and we identify in the report the high-risk areas like schools, the highways, etc. We have a number of key areas in the plan around things that we wish to tackle. Some of them are policy related, communications. We need to think about things like rogue traders down the line and how we manage that and protect residents, training, and then there's some operational and commercial opportunities that we plan to explore within the plan. The plan is attached in full from page 89 of your pack, and the actual action plan itself from page 98. I think finally officers have escalated the risks of ash dieback to senior management, and we've identified within the MTFS this future potential financial pressure in how we might need to manage it, be that through increased inspections, extracting trees, replacement tree policies. and we've given some indicative costings in appended to the report. So in conclusion, I think really what I would say is allowing for comments. The disease is evolving. It poses a challenge in terms of the timeframes. We can't know exactly how advanced it is. So that causes some challenges for us in terms of managing risk. But we think we've devised a plan which will allow the council to proactively manage those risks and some of those commercial opportunities perhaps over time. And I'm happy to take questions, Chair, through you.
Thank you. Just a quick question myself first, then I think I've got Paul and Bill. Vicky, can I ask you a question? It's quite nasty, this fungus, and then of course I've read that that can then delay to the honey fungus coming along, which is, it weakens, and then another fungus can come along and cause more. Matter of interest, is there any use for fungus? Because some funguses are used in medicine, used for pharmaceutical. Is there anything, are they any good for anything?
I'm certainly not aware that the ash dieback fungus is of any use. Beyond that, I would have to say not sure in relation to funguses generally, but yeah, certainly not aware that there's any sort of beneficial use in relation to the Clara.
Can I go over to Paul first?
Thanks. In what you said that the fungus spreads airborne. What my question was, if it depends then how you manage a tree that's dying, because if it's got fungus in it or on it, and you just cut it down, and all that vibration change, as it crashes to the ground, it may just spread spores into the surrounding environment. But I'm not aware. I'm no expert in the biology of these things, but just thought that was an interesting phrase that you used.
Yeah, the advice that we've been given is that ash dieback, the fungus, is likely to be prevalent across the county anyway. So really at this point, although if, for example, if you were in a sort of isolated area where you knew that it was just one tree, you would be able to kind of manage it in a particular way to stop the spread. Really the advice we're getting at this point is that it's everywhere anyway. So it makes less difference how you deal with it at that point.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it, if it's that prevalent? Can I just go to? Do you want to answer to that? Or okay.
Thank you. Sorry, just to add to that, I think, very much has come out under the tree strategy and then this action plan. We are taking a risk-based approach. So while, yes, if it's airborne, there's a risk with that. But as Vicky's already said, chances are it's already there in the atmosphere anyway. However, what we have to really, number one, take cognizance of, is there a threat to human life, i.e. where is the tree located? If it's over a highway, but we think actually it's quite disease and it's quite far through that disease, even with a risk of, that airborne transmission, we have to then act. So just to bear it in mind that we are coming at this from a risk-based approach.
Just before we move on, one of the additional problems that we have throughout the world, and England's no different, it's not just the tree falling down, it's adverse weather. So when we get strong winds, it's the weaker trees or the trees that are diseased are more likely to fall on a road. And I guess that's some of the issues. So I'll go over to Paul and then Bill. Sorry, Bill, your turn. Sorry, I've done Paul.
Thanks, Sharon. Yes, there's a couple of questions. I understand how we're going to manage trees on our own land, and that's fine. But if a private landowner has a tree adjacent to our land, the branch could well fall on our land. Are we going to consult with the landowner? Are we going to offer any help, any advice? Or are we going to say we can do the work on his behalf or not? I mean, must be something there, a commercial opportunity perhaps. And the other thing I'm concerned about is, Chairman's referred to as rogue traders. We have a number of people who travel around the borough offering to do works to trees on unsuspecting householders who may or may not know about ash dieback, and if the contractor says to them, your tree's got ash dieback, I'll take it down for you now, but I want £300, £400 for doing that. We need to get the word out there to have it checked by a qualified tree surgeon, I would suggest, rather than someone just come knocking on your door. The other thing I'm concerned about, of course, is the amount of trees we've lost. We've lost elms, we've got problems with oaks, we've got problems with chestnuts, now we've got problems with ash. So our natural species are now being affected. What are we going to replace them with, and how are we going to manage that, and when are we going to start planting?
Okay, over to you, Anna. You've got a comment there. You were very quick to get to the microphone.
No doubt Joe and Vicky will add to, what I don't cover. In terms of, you're absolutely right, in terms of other landowners, we have a clear strategy now, way forward for our own stock on our land. However, a large part of the ash stock across the county is not in our ownership. What the action plan details, though, is an action to look at our communications. How are we going to communicate with those other landowners, be they private landowners or be they district councils, be them the National Forest, etc., etc. So we will be working up a comm strategy about how we will approach those. Now, in terms of the private landowner, again, coming on to your other point about rogue traders, what we would want to do, but this still all needs to be worked up and the detail will come out then, is to advise them about, ash dieback in general, advise them what it looks like going through the process, and actually if they want work done, here's perhaps, and again, you're not slow off the mark and we're thinking along the same lines, are there commercial opportunities, i.e. could we offer a service to them? Or at least then provide them advice of what to look for in somebody offering that service, i.e. what types of qualifications, etc. Obviously, we'll be calling on the likes of our trading standards colleagues as well to work with us on that, but very aware we have a duty of care and responsibility to those private landowners, not only because of risk to themselves and their land, but also many of these, while they're not in our land, these trees, could affect highway land, for instance. So while it may not be in our land ownership at the moment, if it was to fall, would impact the highways. So we do have a real interest in making sure we're providing them with the right information and pointing them in the right direction. And yes, there's another opportunity around commercialism for us as well, potentially, and we will be looking at that as part of this action plan. Your other point about replanting, yes, that's a key strand of this, action plan. Again, we need to be thinking about what native species do we want to replace these with, how are we going to fund it, etc. Now, I would certainly leave that to the tree experts, of which I'm not one. But I think the other thing, we've built good communications with the likes of the Tree Council on this, who are instrumental in working for government and with authorities down in the south and the southeast of the country, who maybe are a wee bit further down the line on this than we are because they've been affected more at this point in time. So I think we need to use that learning from them, but we're very aware that yes, there's got to be a replanting strategy with this, because potentially the county could look really different if we don't act on that one.
Thank you, Anna. It's a bit of worry. James.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick questions, I hope. First of all, is there any evidence to show that Leicestershire is more badly affected than other parts of the country? I know it says in the report, and you mentioned that it was first identified here, but I was just wondering how we compare to sort of other counties, both neighbouring ones and more widely. And following on from that, really, is there any sort of national strategy to deal with ash dieback from either government or one of the larger organisations that deal with woodland? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, through you, and again, Vicky will correct me if I'm wrong, or later she'll correct me if I'm wrong. On the answer of how more or less affected we are, the disease, in effect, because of this airborne nature and it's come from Asia, in effect, where we saw it as it came into the UK, as you'd imagine, it hit sort of Kent and the south east and has simply migrated up sort of in a diagonal line across the country. So we're almost at the front face of that as it continues to move up through the UK. So yes, we have engaged with colleagues who have been seeing it in more advanced cases in the southeast. In terms of nationally, the approach that DEFRA are taking is to work with the Tree Council, and there's an expert who Vicky's been liaising closely with, who's in effect acted as our critical friend. We had advice only yesterday that they feel that we're at the front cutting edge of how we're choosing to approach to deal with it. So we've engaged with them throughout. So I would say that what we've got is something that's very current and fit for purpose, because what they're offering is this sort of liaison approach of how they think we should be taking this risk-based approach. I think the only other points I might add to sort of comments that were made earlier by Anne is in light of the fact we are coming to yourselves today and going to Cabinet next week, we already have a communications plan in draft. and it does think about issues, because people will see this and it will be in their consciousness and they'll ring us up and say, what am I doing? So we've already started to prepare for that. There's a press release that, if it hasn't gone out, is going out, and it is starting to think about how they engage with countryside services so that they can get the right advice.
Thank you, Joe. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the point on page 94, 2.9, and just a thought came to my head was 2.9 is a link which can give you more detail about the biology of ash dieback, and the simple question is, what biology of ash is the fungus exploiting? Because it's not exploiting on any other species, it's only an ash. And if you know what it's exploiting, then some clever scientist somewhere might be able to figure out how to control it.
Chair, allowing for Vicky may come in, I think, as I understand it, the fungus only affects ash as a species, so whatever species of ash, they are susceptible to this specific fungus. On the issue of super scientists, as I would call them, yes, there is work going on behind the scenes to look at a number of things. They've talked in the past, and they may still be working on it, things like, in effect, almost like a leaf stamp, a genetic test to see if a tree is affected, but they're years away, but they are being looked at. Similarly, if we think that we could lose 90% of the ash stock because of this, they are looking at trying to identify trees that show resistance, and then look if we can, in effect, genetically foster a native species that has an increased resistance. And they think that might only be 1 or 2% of the stock, but that's something that we should be looking at, linked to the fact that eventually we'll be talking about trying to regenerate this species.
Thank you, Joe. Could you imagine, though, we've got some beautiful countryside in Leicestershire, and we all say some of it's a hidden secret to the rest of the country, and we've got to look after it. Leicestershire is a wonderful spot, and I, for one, hopefully we can do something about it, and I'm sure we'll agree with that. Any more questions? Shall we move on? Okay, thank you. Next agenda item will be the environment strategy, and that will be delivered by Anne. No, sorry, Joe. Sorry, I've got...
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to give this another go until you're all sick of hearing my Geordie tones. So, again, if I may, I've asked James to come, because the environment strategy, when we go through it, is such a huge undertaking for an organisation of our size, and so cross-cutting. But I just want to almost thank James and acknowledge the amount of work that he's done behind the scenes in working cross-departmentally with all the consultants and the engagement that's gone on to get us to this point. But again, as we do, I'll front it, and any of the technical detail, James will answer it. In terms of the report itself then, through you, Chair, again, we are seeking views from this committee on the proposed new environment strategy, which is again going to go to Cabinet on the 6th of July. The report sets out the policy position and previous decisions we've had around our environmental strategic approach, and acknowledges that we've been working on this for some time, certainly since late 2016. It will, in effect, be a new strategy. We've discussed this in the past, and it will replace the existing environment strategy and a linked strategic document, the carbon reduction strategy. In the background to the report, officers have set out the reasons and the need for the review, and just to pick out some of those, it allows us certainly to streamline those two referenced strategies and mitigate some of that multiple reporting. Some of them are the same issues, but just in two different documents, so it will be beneficial. It takes account of the significant changes that have happened environmentally since 2011, when our last environment strategy was put before any decision makers. I think we've had to acknowledge that we are in a period of austerity and the challenges that that poses, but I still want to suggest that we're being ambitious. We're just trying to be more pointed about where we can add most value and where we may be better off partnering with other organisations around delivery. So it is about thinking about where we have control and influence. And obviously it sets out a route for more efficient governance. On page 112 of your pack, we set out how the review was carried out, which I mentioned James was heavily involved in, with some support from consultants. And we had a two-stage process of engagement, and that included internal and external key stakeholders. And part of that process was to certainly try and mature and accept internally here all of the other departments' ownership of the environment strategy. It cannot simply be something that E&T advocates. It needs to be embedded in all of the departments within the authority. And again, we can expand on the consultation if necessary. If I concentrate then on the strategy itself, from point 16 of the report, it sets out the key points of the strategy. It tries to take account of the global, national and local drivers for change. We have looked to dovetail it in with how it contributes to the County Council's strategic plan. And we acknowledge that from a policy position, we're going through a period of change, not just ourselves, but certainly nationally, central government. So, whilst the document does cover the period up to 2030, as opposed to 2021, the old document, the existing one, it has sought to be written to reflect that. So we've tried to build in flexibility in the form of a live 3-year action plan, which will allow us to accommodate emerging issues, future change, different government targets, and equally importantly, I think, issues that are in the public consciousness. And if I may, if I just give you an example of that within the strategy, which is deliberately high level, has an ambition around tackling resource use and climate change. But at a more granular level, we're seeing increasing calls for action, be it from council staff or outside of the organisation, on tackling single-use plastics, which are becoming a major pollutant in the oceans. So, because of the way we've designed the strategy, we have put an action in the action plan itself, which talks about explore options for reducing the use of single-use plastics within the council. And we have an intent to look at that later this calendar year. In terms of the scope and structure of the strategy, it covers our legal and statutory duties on environment, our need to embed environmental sustainability into the running of services, and what I think we need to be doing to fulfil our leadership role in this area. There is a vision. I wasn't proposing to read it out, but it's referenced in the report, and as I'd hope expect, it talks around minimising our impacts from our own activities, contributing to improvements locally, and then playing a wider role in environmental protection. There are 15 aims across 6 themes. They're referenced in the report at point 22, and they all have supporting objectives. I've already mentioned the live 3-year action plan, which supports delivery of those priorities and identifies where more work or evidence gathering needs to be taking place or is planned. And I think, as you'd expect, there are a suite of high-level targets covering climate change, waste, water, energy, transport and environmental performance, and they are on pages 141 and 42 in your pack. We do accept that there'll be work needed to develop some of those targets out to 2030, because in a number of cases they simply don't exist into that period of longevity, so we will need supporting key performance indicators where they don't exist. And I think lastly, it's worth mentioning in terms of governance, proposed performance monitoring and resources, taking each of those in turn. The new strategy will be supported by an Environment Strategy Delivery Board, which will have cross-departmental representation to continue to maintain that ownership and drive forward delivery of the action plan. We were proposing to have annual performance reports that will also be published on the web, so we can monitor progression over time. And in terms of investment, we've invested substantially on things that support the environment in recent years, over £40 million, whether it's LED, etc. But we do that on the basis of evidence-based investment. So we'll be supporting that going forward, the same approach. So on a case-by-case basis, we would present that evidence and take a decision. And with that, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, I've got a question from Janet, and then I think Max, and then Bill. Janice, forgive me. Fire away.
Yes, in Ilshilton in the past, I'm coming to page 146 and I'm looking at great communities. And in Ilshilton we've certainly had our share of problems in the past, but I'm pleased to say that a group of volunteers have now come together and created Ilshilton in Bloom. And to see our town now, it looks absolutely amazing. And they gave many, many times up, and they have got pride now in our town, and we've got not so many problems. We have problems like every town, but we don't have them pulled up or destroyed, so I'm really, really pleased. So I just wanted to bring that up to know that, and Barwell, so towns and villages, it's a knock-on effect. Shilton did it, so Barwell did it. So it is becoming a really good cause. My next item is on page 158, and it's explore options to reduce the use of single plastics. And I know, well, I'm asking, and you've already touched on it, that can this council look at ways to remove plastic bottled water, well, talking about water issues, from this council, because I know there's freestanding little stainless steel small cabinets with a little sink in the top that's plugged in for tap water that is cooled. It is used at Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council in their chamber, and all the officers use it in the sinks that's been plumbed in specially. So that removes all the plastic bottles and all the water, and then you can bring your own bottle, fill it up, and then it's saving a lot of problems that this plastic is creating. And just one other thing, can you tell me if there's recycling bins on all the floors of this council that deal with all the recyclable and just the discarded rubbish on every floor, so that staff and ourselves could use it? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Janice. Just show us your bottle. Come on, you were showing us in. Look at this. Bought our own bottle. I'm not sure about the green. Looks a bit like Shrek, I've got to say. Okay, over to Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back on the sort of ideas and business cases around single-use plastics in the county. Blake may want to come in on this, but I certainly know that we've had very topical debates very recently, as early as this morning, acknowledging that this is an ambition, that it's very much in the public consciousness, and I'm certainly being encouraged to fast-track a lot of the activity, and it will arguably look at opportunities around the disposable cups that have a plastic polymer attached to the paper cup. Things like the way we deal with our salad boxes in the catering. There are other opportunities as well. If I was to give an example, we have museums and we wrap lots of things in bubble wrap, but there are reusable options. So I think all I would say is, certainly as officers, we've been given a green light to try and fast track something which at the minute is identified to look at in October. And I think we're already going to be doing work over the summer to see if we can support that. On the question of recycling containers around the county, we certainly have infrastructure for recycling across the council estate, and we have it at the satellite sites as well, and they perform to varying degrees, and we've talked about that at this committee in the past. But I acknowledge, so for, we do have facilities for bags, bottles, salad, we have a number of things. But what we also accept is that there's a lot of confusion around plastics. So there are types of plastics that arguably are of such a low grade. Black plastic knives and forks, for example, they're not recyclable. They are plastic, but there is no market for them. If there's no market for them, they go in general waste. But the uninitiated or the non-technical people would simply go, it's plastic, so I'll recycle it. So we have more opportunities to look at that, either by taking away those products or by thinking about how we manage the systems and the processes that we have. But it is on our list of early activity to do.
Blake, you want to come in on this?
Yeah, because firstly, just to say, I'm really excited about this strategy. It's timely, it's important, I think it's a symbol of where we are in the 21st century, and I think we'll all concur that we should play our part in making this world, this country, this region a better place for future generations. So as the forward says, I'm really looking forward to supporting the collaboration. On the single-use plastics, one of the problems, and I think when we've taken performance reports and we've seen the metrics in other parts of the property estate that the county council owns, it's been very difficult to meet some of our objectives in terms of how much we recycle, etc. One of the key differences within this particular strategy is that we will now have a body that crosses across all of the departments of the county council, chaired by the assistant director for the environment. Because if you talk about, are there recycling bins on every floor of this council building alone? Well, that's a property function, and before now we've been very disjointed how we've approached our objectives in terms of our environmental targets, etc. Now we have a single body chaired by Joe Gore, Assistant Director. We can work with the economic development teams to enhance and support the voluntary organisations that make the various places in Leicestershire look so great. We can work with the property department to make sure that we've got synergy in terms of what they're doing, what we would like to see happen, so we can mutually achieve the joint objective. So I think this is a great starter. It is going to be an evolving strategy. Many of the metrics that sit behind this, I think 140, James would tell you, but it's something. It's a journey that we're about to go on here, and it's something that we need to put some express on, because the more we can do here, the better the Leicestershire area will be for future generations. And I care, like you do, very deeply about that.
I think there's not a member here in the County Council who won't support that. Did you want to respond there, Janet?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you both for the report. I hope it's going to be looked at sooner rather than later, like I know you said, and I do hope it is done. And I think we have to get it over to all as councillors and to everyone that it is our responsibility to look at ways of saving the plastic, and especially in this council, because we have to set the good tone for the residents that we support. And my concern regarding, like, when we take a bottle to go in the chamber or anywhere like that, sometimes I've noticed that they're a quarter left, half left, and that is wasting the water as well, so they're left behind. So I think if you could get some form of tap water cooled, look into it from other councils and that, then you could get your cup and fill up what you want and not wasting water by having all these bottles. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Janice. And just to let you know, I've finished one. Look, there's no water left in that one. Just before I go to Max,
Alan, 2 bottles.
No, I've got to finish that one as well. Just quickly, one of the caveats of all this is, and I'm sure everybody agree, particularly some of the older people around, including me, we've turned into a throwaway society. Years ago, things you could repair. I've got things that I've kept for years. I wouldn't dream of throwing away. Now, it goes wrong, you chuck it.
They call you a hoarder, Mr.
No, I'm not a hoarder. Well, you know, but do you know what I'm saying, though? But I've seen good products that could have been saved, that actually to repair costs more. You may as well buy a new one. In fact, I got a call the other day, don't send it back, chuck it, we'll send you a new something and replace it. And I thought, wow. So it's difficult, and then, you know, this is the problem with the people just throw things away. It's education as well. It's getting back to the days where we look after things, and if it is something that's you can hold and look after, like a cup or something glass or something that you can keep, then a lot better than plastic. Max, over to you.
Thanks. Oh, yes, I agree with all those remarks, and it also comes down to international agreements, isn't it? And that includes the EU. Okay. The first thing I'd like to refer to is the vision statement, and by the way, I'm sure this will go through Cabinet, not least because it's got your face on it, Blake. And I thought... Indeed, yeah. I thought with the vision statement...
It's not a beauty contest, Matt.
Up there, in the reception, in big letters, so that anybody coming into the building can see what we're about. I do have to say, though, that it is a little bit wordy. And the purpose of a vision is really so that the idea's got to be captured quickly. Now, I just took out 10 words in a couple of minutes, and it still meant the same thing. So that's something you might want to look at for version 2, because I'm sure this, as I say, will go through. You know, we continue to play a significant role. You know, we will play our full part of, you know. But the big gain in terms of climate change is going to be, in this authority, it's going to be about transport. That's where the CO2 is being churned out. And I felt that, although it's a function within this authority, and I recognise that our primary obligation is to, within this authority, as Janice has explained, within the building and within the mileage that our staff do, it isn't really linked up with the other strategies or the other policies we have in transport. And wider than that, it seemed to me that there was a very good case for, as you have done, you set out the strategic aims and the issues and actions which will be the outcomes. But it doesn't really link with the rest of the authority's business, particularly in terms of transport. And I'd just like to see that joined up effort between the aims and the actions and where those actions are carried out. I mean, obviously the local transport plan would be one, but others. But otherwise, nobody's going to make that link. Thank you, Chair.
Good point, Max. Anne, could you? That's a really interesting point.
I'll start and then I'll hand over to James, if that's all right. I mean, fundamentally, because this now encompasses what was previously the previous version of the environment strategy, as well as our carbon reduction strategy. Those carbon reduction targets have transposed over to here, so we'll sit below that and behind it. So the ones that we had in terms of CO2 emissions for transport, etc., are still all there. So in terms of our, our transport actions to operate, to achieve, help achieve and drive that, performance across that, they still all have to happen, because actually it's subsumed behind all this as part of our targets. They are still there, they haven't gone. The wider point about, yes, what we do on that and linking all that up, as ever, as we've known over the years, and you'll know as well as me, Max, that actually it's fundamentally quite hard to drive from our position the returns on that and have that level of influence. There's a lot of things we can do and we are doing, but ultimately the challenges we have is, if your economy is growing, and the figures always quoted before, 1% increase in GDP equals 3% increase in transport and traffic, that means congestion and challenges. So where we are seeing benefits, however, is technology, isn't it? The car manufacturers looking at, what they're doing in terms of emissions, fuel, types of fuel, etc. And as we know, things will be happening on the diesel front sooner rather than later, etc. So the whole host of things that need to come into play to actually achieve that. But what I would say is, those carbon reduction targets haven't gone. They have been subsumed into that. So from that perspective, we haven't changed our policies in any way. We will still be operating to try and achieve more sustainable transport, less carbon reduction, but still do everything else we want as a county, which is economic growth, accessibility, etc., etc. Don't know if James wants to add anything or not.
Specifically on the transport issue, as Joe said earlier on, we've written the document as a high-level strategic document that can last a test of time to 2030. We are existing within a constantly changing and evolving situation in terms of government policy, technology, as just been said. We do have transport and travel as one of the 6 thematic areas, and we've got aims and objectives within the strategy, looking at how can we reduce our own travel and transport impacts on the environment, but also how can we support the reduction of the impacts in the county itself. When you look on the action plan, you see a bit more detail there in terms of the actual steps we're going to take. We're hoping to, for example, to avail of some support that's available from the government to do an assessment of our own fleet to see what is the potential for moving to a low carbon fleet. We're also waiting on a number of government decisions following on from the Clean Growth Strategy, the 25-year Environment Plan. We're also waiting for the conclusions on the Paris Agreement. The government has to release its first 5-year plan in terms of how it's going to implement the Paris Agreement by 2020. There's also the government's due, was on news this morning, to release its next carbon budget. So it's difficult for us to define actions and set targets with all that kind of changes coming very quickly over the next couple of years. So we've written the document in such a way that it can respond to and flex to that changing circumstance. It doesn't stop us doing stuff, but it's just difficult to define exactly what we'll do until we've got a bit more detail about the context within which we're going to have to operate.
Thank you, James. I mean, it's like writing a budget. You in reality, you know somewhat that you need to cater for, but sometimes there's the unexpected and the unusual that comes along that you haven't catered for. So I do understand where you're coming from. Blake?
Yeah, very quickly, I think Max's point is valid and key. It's something that both Kristin and I, through our lead member briefings in the evolution of this document, also asked. I was keen to see the linkage between the strategy and what else is going on within the council. In response to Janice's question, I made the point that property are doing their thing, Children and Families Department are doing their thing, but we need something that overarches all of that, chaired by a single body. So I think it's a valid point. The second point that I just want to bring to everyone's attention, although this hasn't been formally adopted, just to pick up on what James said, it won't stop us from doing stuff anyway. We've just recently procured an electric vehicle for the department to reduce the business mileages. It has a direct impact on the CO2 emissions from vehicles. Okay, it's one electric vehicle. It's for the department to use, during business hours, etc. But I envisage a time where we have a fully electric fleet. That needs to be explored because there's a capital cost there. But the more we move in that direction, the better our outcomes will be in accordance with the strategy. The third point I want to make, if there is a set of words, or you think the vision can be improved, just maybe after the meeting, you don't have to read it out, but we'll look at that and we'll see if we can change the wording of the vision to accommodate a better, more understandable set of words,
Well,
Chairman.
that's a real nice offer. I'm sure the members appreciate that. Bill.
Interesting document, Chair. I don't think it goes far enough, though. I expect something a bit more dynamic than this and a bit more thrust behind it. I go back over the years. We suggested street lighting and solar panels years ago. It took years to actually get them up and running and installed. We seem to be a long way behind other authorities about the environment. It doesn't seem to be a priority within the county council, and I think it should be. We should be the leaders in the environment, examples of what can and cannot be done. So I'm looking to Blake to actually push this forward on the county council's agenda. Such things as the environmental impact statement on all the key decisions should be there, so we know exactly what impacts having on the environment, all the key decisions that Cabinet make. One of the things we did discuss this morning was the plastic waste. That, to me, we need to do something with the county council as quick as possible about plastic waste. So I'm looking to Blake again to actually move things forward on plastic waste. We've done away with plastic teaspoons. We had metal teaspoons, now we've gone to wooden sticks. I wonder where the wood comes from. Are we importing wood to make the wooden sticks to stir things with now? We need to look broader at this. As far as I'm concerned, the only wood that we can use for that sort of thing is sycamore. All the rest of the things are imported woods, and I'm not in favour of importing woods to use to stir cups of tea with. So we need to look broader than what the strategy is saying. It's a start. This is not the finish. This is the first step on the ladder. I'm expecting far more than this over the next few years, how we progress things and how we come up to date. And I'm looking to Blake as being a younger member of the county council who's going to be no doubt longer than us for the future generations to push forward. Because whatever we do this year will affect our grandchildren and their children in future years. And once we destroy the environment, we will never get it back again, because you can't replace things. Once they've gone for good. So, we need to be broader than that. This afternoon, we've just passed the longest day. And we sit in a room with the lights on. Is the design of the building right? Do we need the lights on today? Have we checked to see if we need the lights on today? It's small things, every small step adds up to the whole. And that's what we need to consider. Not accept things that have always done it, we've got to keep doing it. Times are different now, and we're destroying the environment far too quickly, and we need to look after it, preserve it. And have we consulted Friends of the Earth about our statement at all? Because if not, we perhaps ought to consider asking them what they think about our environment strategy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bill. What's wonderful of having you on Scrutiny is that you scrutinise very well and your point of view there, and it's very passionate, and we really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Blake.
Well, I agree with Bill on the objectives. We share those objectives. We both care. We all care about the environment. We care about this document, and I'd agree that this is a start of a journey. I've already explained that we're going to have a board set up with the assistant director, but I think I've also touched on part of the problem, which is at the moment we're operating as a county council in a very disparate way. There are various departments, the property department, the other major spenders within the authority doing their own thing, and there's not anything pulling it all together, and I think we can make some headway. Where I disagree with Bill, although I agree in spirit about where we're going and the direction of travel, I think we have come a long way as a county council. We have been a leader in terms of the streetlight LED project. We have a biomass energy facility. We have solar panels on our property buildings. This building in particular, we're making a great deal of headway in terms of reducing business mileage. We are conscious about our obligations. We are, at the moment, under the system we're currently operating within, doing the best we can. We can do a lot more, but I don't think it's fair to say that we're lagging behind anyone. I think we are leading in many respects, but I agree, there's much more to do.
Of course, Bill, you can come back in.
Is that I looked at my paperwork. I do tend to keep my papers, and it's over 5 years since we sat in a meeting and I asked the then Director of Finance, Brian Roberts, have we got the money to start LED lighting now and solar panels on the roof of this building? And he said yes, the money is available to do it. Yet it took a further 3 years before we started. And that's the sort of thing I mean, is that the idea was there, the money was there, but nobody picked the cudgel up to actually go ahead and get it done. And that's what frustrates me. We have good ideas, but they don't actually get implemented for a long while.
Well,
so that's why I look back on that.
I'll respond to that. I think there's been some transparency here today, and that is Blake and Joe and there's not a joined up thinking, joined up delivery as some of the departments in the building. I think you've said that a number of times, quite openly and honestly. Part of the goal of this is to solve that problem. And I think if there was more joined up delivery in this programme, then that would quicken things, because one department says yes, one department doesn't know. And I do understand your frustration, but there's transparency here saying we ain't joined up, we're going to sort it. And I think that honesty should be applauded, and I know that will help us go forward. But this is why we scrutinise, and I think it's brilliant. And I do appreciate it's not easy getting a big department like this enormous building with different departments, different thought processes, but I know you'll do it, and I know the way forward is very positive. Let's go to Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Really a question about the report. Really good report, enjoyed reading it, lots of detail, which was great, but also I think much as anything, probably the emphasis of the report is absolutely in the right place. In particular, looking at the section on air pollution, I know it's a point that's raised constantly, both by schools. We were listening to issue about transport around schools, but obviously pollution in particular is often picked up by schools and parents in relation to children. Large chunks of the county also obviously have quite significant roads actually going through them, whether it's the M1 or A46. So pollution, I think, quite rightly also has been picked up by national government as being quite a key item, and I welcome Michael Gove's declarations about phasing out of non-electric cars over a period of time, and there was an argument to be had about the speed of that. In particular, really what we're doing as a county council, you mentioned about electric cars, which again is a good move, and I think those councils that have actually gone down that route seem to be reasonably happy. But it's other things that we do as well. I noted the commitment about not increasing pollutants in the air, and again, very, very good. National government again, likewise, even comments about using wood-burning stoves to actually try and outlaw those and trying to reduce the pollutants that are actually going into the air. And obviously, it's possible to introduce scrubbers and things like that, but actually, as far as the population is concerned, that is still a live issue as far as soon as you burn something, you produce something. So really a question about the reference to revised municipal waste strategy, and just really a question about whether we are definitely ruling out or still including in burning waste for energy, because I know that's something that's been considered elsewhere, and really whether it's something that's being ruled out or whether it's going to be ruled in about burning waste in Leicestershire.
Blake, over to you.
I will pass over to Joe. I'll just say we are technology neutral. That is the policy at the moment. I'm not aware of any immediate plans to go in that direction, but Joe will answer that point more
Okay, well, Joe nearly beat you with a finger on the button there, but you, I've got to say, in pointless, you'd win. So, over to Joe.
Darn it. Through you, Chair. Yes, in terms of the revised municipal waste management strategy, as Blake said, we have always, and I would anticipate, continue to be technology neutral. It is about the provenness of the technology. Now, that should be both an opportunity and an issue for us. So as the market matures for different solutions, we've gone out twice in recent years because we know we need to plan for this new strategy. And some of the contracts we enter into run for 20 or 30 years. We need to be engaging with the market around what sort of technological advances there have been. If you were to ask me, and my background is waste, I'm afraid that probably the most proven technologies are still, I mean, landfill is redundant. You'll always need it, but it is not an ambition to use landfill. Energy from mass burn, energy from waste is a viable solution, and we do utilise some of that infrastructure strategically inside, outside of the county. I think the only other point to add is in terms of our capacity to have our own infrastructure is limited. Now, that's arguably a good thing, but in terms of the amount of residual waste we have in Leicestershire, it's around about 160,000 tonnes of black bag waste. You're typically building infrastructure now in terms of the end destinations that are technological solutions. You're talking 300, 400,000 tonne facilities. So we would absolutely be in the game of engaging on a regional level. So we don't have a problem with out of county access to things. We are technology neutral. That is as much I accept about the financial envelope, but it's also about the viability of the technology. We still absolutely look at things like pre-treatment, pre-shredding, metal extraction, wherever we can extract value rather than just get rid of the material. We will look at those options, and the plan is that we need to do that in the run-up to 2020. So we are talking about it now because the lead time for that activity will be starting this year.
Is that okay, Jonathan? That's good. Any other to add?
Just one quick question, because I mean, clearly there are energy from waste facilities already around, quite large ones. And I'm assuming from your answer that actually you are looking at some of those as being potential for material that otherwise would have been going for landfill.
Sorry, Chair. We currently have an approach to managing our waste that is in effect a mixed economy. We already send waste to Coventry, for example, their incinerator. We engage with a number. We've talked to Nottingham. We talked to the city about their infrastructure, which is not energy from waste. We're aware that Biffa have a planning permission to build an energy from waste facility in the middle of the county off Junction 23. We don't contract with them at the minute, but if we were to go to the market and that piece of infrastructure were ever to be built, it would be in that procurement process to ascertain if we actually found a price or a solution that meant we used it. So the good thing is that gives us resilience. We use a number of facilities, including around our county boundaries, some energy from waste, and it means that, you know, they have to have factory shutdowns, they have maintenance. It means we can redeploy the waste to different places, but we use a number. Yes, we do.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, well, I think we've come to the end of the agenda. First of all, just to remind everybody, the next committee of this committee is the 6th of September. 2018. It is, I know a number of people are going on holiday. I'd like to thank James and Vicky from their busy schedules for making yourself available. Really appreciate your expertise. As all said, there is no urgent other items. I'd like to thank you for attending today. Have a safe journey home. If you see any plastic, pick it up and take it with you. And when you drink your water, try not to use plastic bottles anymore. And that goes for you, Jeffrey. Get that down you. Okay, thank you. Take care and have a lovely weekend, everybody. Thank you.